trying to accomplish that really started with core services, some of which include first responders that are needed for our community that are long overdue, and ranging from any number of things, from economic standpoints to critical services, infrastructure. So, it's a tough decision, but I feel like it's overdue.
Any other discussion?
I'll reserve mine for when I vote, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And a motion, and a second. Call the roll.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Ms. Cookenberg.
Before I vote, I want to also speak for the record. I am most definitely in favor of everything that we are trying to move forward on. The radio system, the ambulance, the shell building, the fire truck, all of these things are worthwhile in this community. I feel and have felt and have stated on many occasions, and will do so again, that I think the monies we spent last year, although very worthy for our education system, may have been in excess. And with all of that, I felt that the bare minimum should have been going into our coffers from our citizens, especially in this time. So my vote is no.
Is a no. Mr. Booth is not present, and Mr. Turner.
Yes.
Okay. On a 3-1, the motion passes. Thank you all.
Thank you everyone for their diligence.
Yes.
Mr. Ladies is free to go back to work.
Well,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
yes, they're also gonna, they have been doing double duty assistance with us and working on the cigarette tax as well. So, Mr. Chair, if we might go back to 6F and move forward just a little bit early, if that's all right with you all.
It's fine.
And since all the parties are here, and of course that's Steve Durbin to talk to us a little bit about cigarette tax options. As you know, this has been a topic that certainly preceded me and continues on, and there's been some discussions in this body previously about participating. If a tax was levied, would we participate in a regional effort? Would we participate with our region? There's even been some possibility of working with another region, the other one you work with, I heard yesterday. And so we wanted to have Mr. Durbin come and talk to you more about the tax and what your options might be related to that. In addition, I would tell you that these two folks back here, your Commissioner of Revenue and your Treasurer, have been working really hard, talking to their colleagues about what their experiences have been and how they see this might work, however you choose to go forward, if you do. And I'll just call out Missy if I might. So just so we would have accurate numbers, because I know that's been one of the things that's been most troubling to you all, is we don't know how much money we would make. I do have some estimate numbers from the PDC in terms of potential cost if we were part of the region. But of course, most important is how much might be garnered from such a tax were it levied. And Missy has called every organization in the county, not in town, but it's just in the county, to see how many packs of cigarettes they actually sell. And we've been able to use that, and I am certain she's the only one in the region that has done that, so thank you.
Above and beyond.
Well, good morning again, members of the board. You have options due to the revisions in the State Code of Virginia, which have now empower counties to levy a cigarette tax. Previously, that was only a power that cities or towns could have, and counties in Northern Virginia. unlike cities or towns, you are limited. The maximum tax rate would be 2 cents per cigarette, equivalent of 40 cents per pack. You do have the option to create and become a member of a regional tax collection authority. Regional tax collection board, not a separate authority. It would be formed pursuant to the statute that permits the levying of the cigarette tax and pursuant to 15.2-1300, which is the joint exercise of powers statute for localities to act jointly. The magic number for that would be 6. You would need 6 localities to join to form a regional body. And the pros and cons of that approach would be, on the upside, if you have a number of localities that are doing this for the first time, there's going to be a learning curve. And rather than each locality having 6 different offices that would be preparing to implement the tax, you'd have 1. Then moving forward, you'd have the overhead costs of the shared overhead costs of only 1 or a few centralized agents responsible for collecting the tax, administering it, enforcing it, notifying the county attorneys or the Commonwealth's attorneys that there are violations for enforcement. So you'd have a centralized staff, essentially, and streamline the workforce that way. The cons of that are it could be more complicated if you have 6 localities with 6 different tax rates.
Right.
Because joining the regional approach would not necessarily dictate what your tax rate is going to be. So that could, if you have a number of different tax rates, I could see how that might impact the efficiencies that you're trying to gain from having a regional approach. I'm aware that a number of localities that have considered joining the regional board, but who are cities or towns and already have their sort of tax collection system up and running. There hasn't been much perceived value there, so they're a little more likely to go it alone. Those are sort of the sort of a 30,000 feet view. If you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to address it.
I have one question.
Sure.
After talking to some retailers, is there a possibility? I think the current cigarette tax on the state is done at the wholesale level where the realtors don't realtors. Losing my mind here. But the actual store doesn't have to collect it. Is that a possibility on a regional approach where the stores wouldn't have to collect, individual stores wouldn't have to collect it? We could do it on a wholesale level?
Well, the wholesalers, the distributors, would be responsible for obtaining the stamps, applying the stamps, and paying the tax. So, yes. I mean, the retailers would be responsible for making sure that they're selling stamped cigarettes. They're not selling untaxed, unpermitted cigarettes, but ultimately that can be done through the wholesalers, distributors.
Okay, that's what I was hoping. And if we did it on a county basis for each individual establishment would have to buy a stamp, and that would be on them, wouldn't it?
Yes, they would have the option of purchasing stamped cigarettes from a distributor.
They would
Okay, so they wouldn't have to get them themselves.
Only if there were no distributors or wholesalers to buy from. I mean.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So, to follow up, you're saying that if we go with the regional approach, there is a wholesaler or wholesalers, plural, that are affixing the tax stamps on the individual packs of cigarettes within a carton? Is that my understanding, or is it?
No,
If
what
I'm
I say,
if I'm getting too much in the weeds, just tell me. I really do want to know how this all.
well, that, if you impose a tax, they have to be stamped. So if you go it alone, the distributors, wholesalers would be responsible for getting a Floyd County tax stamp on it,
Correct.
or they couldn't sell the cigarettes.
In this county.
Yeah.
Right. The regional approach, however, there's a regional stamp, and the wholesalers are affixing those stamps to the cartons and or individual packs.
Yes.
Okay. And there's a state tax, right, on them, so they're already set up to do all this, and, right?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a
I don't even know.
wholesaler here to interview.
I know.
Essentially, yes.
I just want to make it as
new
easy as possible to collect the money
And to get it to the
and
suppliers.
to get it to, yeah, exactly, on everybody.
Well, one of the things I was worried about was, I've talked to a couple store owners that said, it's just one more thing for them to keep track of. So, they're doing our meals tax on some of these places and sales tax, and then, trying to keep track of this in addition. I just wanted to make sure that if it was done at a wholesale level, it would be easier on, each little gas station. So
Absolutely.
if they had to pay for it, one less thing for them to have to deal with.
Right.
Right, the way the ordinances that I've seen are set up is that you identify certain people as agents who are responsible for applying the stamps. And then the retailers would be responsible for buying from one of those designated agents. And anybody who wants to sell, wholesale cigarettes in Floyd County can become an agent if they basically sign up. So it's not like the retailers would not have options. But whoever was selling wholesale within the county would have to essentially sign up and make sure that they're purchasing the requisite amount of stamps for the applicable tax, making sure that those stamps get applied to the cigarettes before they're sent to the retailers. And then the retailers, the tax would already be built in to their cost, and they would be selling stamped cigarettes.
Right. So how does where in this chain does the tax get collected? At the wholesalers level?
When the stamps are purchased.
Right.
At the wholesaler.
By the wholesaler.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure. Chairman?
Yeah.
So, let's say in the case of a small store, I know at least one in the county, maybe more, that sells cigars that they may buy not from a wholesale or local delivery. It might be something that's shipped in, one or two boxes at a time. How would they go about then getting a stamp for those if it's not something that would come through a normal wholesale operation that would do deliveries?
That's an excellent question, because it's asked. It's asked by members of the public. This is something that is on people's mind, and it needs to be clarified. This is not a tobacco tax. This is not the state tobacco products tax. This is not a cigar tax. It's a cigarette tax, and the definitions of cigarette are kind of constrained. So in your example, Mr. Yoder, nothing would change for them. There would be no tax on them.
So cigars would not be taxed under this. Cigarettes would be considered separate from cigars.
Right.
And these are pre-rolled in cartons or general packs, right? So loose tobacco, pipe tobacco, any of those products, chewing tobacco, whatever, none of those things are taxed. Is that correct?
Correct. I'd have to look at the definition for roll your own. I don't think the roll your own is subject to the cigarette tax. But as far as the other examples, snuff or chewing tobacco, cigars, they're not covered. They're not under the definition of cigarette. They're not subject to a cigarette tax.
Yeah, and what I mean by roll your own in terms of like, the cigarette tax is on pre-packaged, not loose tobacco.
Yeah, I mean, I want to double
You'd have
check
to
that,
check
but that's my
on-
understanding. Yeah,
Alright.
that it's pre-rolled cigarettes for
Right,
this local tax.
okay.
I think
Yeah, that
that's,
was gonna be my next question, because there are a few stores here that specialize in rolling papers and, you know, like some of the ingredients that would be used for people that roll their own cigarettes, which is
This,
you know, more widely used than I realized.
Mr. Chair, I think Missy might have something.
Yeah.
This right here is talking about the pre-rolled and the tobacco that is rolled. It says if it can be lit, that middle one, that's on it. That's what like, a cigar, I mean, like a cigar.
Lord have mercy.
Include a cigar, so I wasn't sure why.
Your point.
so are you talking about the definition of cigarette?
Yeah, where it's talking about it's talking about roll your own and anything with tobacco and paper that can be lit and, I don't know.
So for purposes of this section, 58.1-100, it does say that for roll your own, 0.09 ounces of roll your own tobacco shall constitute one individual cigarette. For
But what does that mean?
everything else, so if you're selling a drum of tobacco, you know, if you tax it by weight,
Right,
so if it has 9 ounces, 0.9 ounces would be one cigarette, you 10 cigarettes.
oh. So that tobacco would be taxed. Even though those don't really have a stamp on them now from the state of Virginia. They do? Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
But tobacco, on the cigarette example, any rolled tobacco wrapped in paper or any substance not containing tobacco. So if it's wrapped in tobacco leaf, it's not a cigarette.
Never take your cigars out.
Yeah, because
Yeah, that's
cigars are in
exactly.
tobacco leaf.
I
That's,
see what you're saying. Okay.
So there you go.
yeah, so it's not
That's
anything that can be
exempt.
done.
Gotcha.
All right, I'm still all natural, I use tobacco.
You're still all natural. So, cans of loose tobacco. What about cans for pipe tobacco? It just is a cigarette. Is that what that said?
That pipe tobacco could be a multiple use. It could be a cigarette or a pipe or one.
I don't know.
But I don't know how they.
I don't know. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, I'm just asking the questions.
Without getting too deep in the weeds, I think really what the question should be, I don't want to eliminate some stores from being able to sell certain items.
Right.
Because their particular wholesaler says, you know what, to sell in the Floyd County, we only sell $30 a month of this one particular product, so we're not going to get the stamp, and then that can't be sold anymore.
And then a customer is,
Then a store can't sell whatever that is. I mean, it would be nice to maybe do a little bit of research into some stores that do more specialty things, just to be sure that we're covering all our bases where they can continue to sell it and we collect the tax.
I guess the other thought process on that, jumping from that question, Lauren, is regionally, if we go with the, regional approach, which I don't know where we're at with that right now. Everybody's gonna be looking at that, from the small stores in Giles and Montgomery County and Christiansburg and Floyd and, the town of Floyd and the town of Christiansburg, and, I mean, I don't know.
And I don't even know if we have a specialty store in the county. It may just be several in the town, but, I was just thinking out loud, on some of the things that are sold, rolling papers and loose tobacco and different things, making sure that we, people are still able to sell those things.
I think, Lauren, your comment, it already is, recognizes this, but you probably should point out that you're talking about stores within the town, and I take Lauren's comments to mean that, to assume that the tax is not applicable, the county tax would not be applicable in the town. And that is correct,
Right.
unless the town either doesn't have a cigarette tax, in that case the county tax would apply, or if the town were to adopt a cigarette tax but also provide in their cigarette tax ordinance that the county tax also applies within the limits of the town. Those are the only two times that the county tax would apply within town limits.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if, since Ms. Cook was asked, I can give you kind of an update on where we are on the regional situation, if that's kind of where we are in the discussion. So as you know, there's been discussion primarily through the PDC about doing this on a regional basis. As I think Steve pointed out, for us to be able to do this on a regional basis, the legislation requires that there be 6 participating jurisdictions. At this point, if both Floyd County and the town participated, and the others who indicate they probably will, we would get to 6. But that's it. So that was also part of why I wanted to make sure that we had more conversation about this today, because there is a possibility that at some point that may not really be an option. At one point, there was a thought that there may be more jurisdictions that would be interested. And I think in some of the other cases, both myself and Lisa have been communicating with some of the other folks, but I think there's some feeling that in some of these areas where the towns have been collecting forever, that there's really not much left at the county level, so it's not really worth it to them, or other reasons. But nonetheless, it is kind of our working model is to get to 6, both Floyd County and the town would have to be a participant in the regional model. Based on Mr. Booth's questions to me in previous meetings, I've pushed Kevin at the PDC to come up with what his best guess estimate would be in terms of what it would cost to do that function. And then, of course, there'd have to be discussion about how that would be divided out by the participants, right? So that's kind of a secondary discussion, but what his original estimates to us assumed, and this is again for the region, so this would not be just for us, this person would have to work all of those 6 jurisdictions. He was looking at hiring a full-time employee with benefits, and that their base pay would be in the neighborhood of $60,000. That there would, of course, have to be office space. There would have to be stamps purchased, and of course that flows through, but there would have to be an initial stamp purchase, and I think the estimate on that was around $35,000. And then because it is dealing with the region, that there would be a vehicle, and the estimate on the vehicle was $27,000. So all said, it was talking about over $100,000, $120,000, $150,000-ish that then would be divided out. Which also caused me to want to come back to you all and speak to these folks about if you wanted to still pursue a regional approach. If we want to talk to Kevin about if we participate, we would want it. We don't think it's a full-time position with a car, or if you want to do it locally or not do it at all. Obviously, those are your options, and these are all, you know, casual is the wrong word, but obviously, you know, they're kind of discussions amongst ourselves.
Yeah, they're preliminary discussions.
Thank you. Thank you for being my thesaurus. I was missing one. Yes, preliminary. So I think that's kind of where the update is. They're all kind of, the other thing that's gone on related to that is because I think there's a recognition that there's a possibility the region wouldn't get to 6. Is I guess there's been some discussion, I don't know if you've been a part of this, Steve, about maybe joining the other group that Steve's actually working with. And I don't know if that's allowed or not, but I know there's been some initial forums and some other talks about that.
What group are you working with?
The Mount Rogers Planning District Commission, I've been assisting them with exploring their options with setting up a regional tax collection board. And preliminarily,
Smith with,
Grayson, Carroll, City of Galax, Town of Hillsville, et cetera, kind of
gotcha.
Mount Rogers,
Yeah.
PDC footprint. And as conceived, Bland County, as conceived, the idea was just to have it within the region and not open it up to other localities outside of that footprint. But that is something that is not prescribed by statute. I think that's just the way the discussions had taken place, the sort of the way the concept was formed. So if there's some interest in doing that and some willingness on the parties to make that happen, I don't see that as an obstacle. There's not a state code provision that would prevent you from doing that.
Yeah, and I would add to that, there's not been any form of an answer back. It was some, again, kind of preliminary conversations about, hey, if we have, we end up with 4 folks, would there be a possibility of 4 of us joining you? And I think it just was kind of left as something to mull.
Right.
The other thing before we move on, and I just want to make sure at some point that we let both of these ladies tell you some of what their research has been whenever we get to that point, Mr. Chair.
Not to hear from.
Yeah, absolutely. Boots on the ground, as it were.
He had to you get to go up there.
Yes, you do. Okay. That's what you get.
We do teamwork.
Yes.
But when you're speaking, one of you gotta.
One of, kind of like Lauren said, one of the things that I did run across when I was calling the stores, the retailers, there were 2 that are smaller, and they were concerned that they wouldn't be able to change their cash registers and that they would have to update their registers. And one of them even made the comment that he might just quit selling because he was not even selling 100 packs a month.
How many?
And that,
Not even selling
not
100?
even selling, he said 23 to 24 packs a week usually.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
And it's not clear. It's not clear to me what the internal process of the retailers would be, but if they're buying stamped,
That's what, when
cigarettes,
you were explaining that, they may not have understood.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't understand that. They just voiced their concern. If both of them did, that they said that they would need to update because one of them made a comment that he was out of buttons and that he would have to, if he had to change rates and things, he would have to add a better cash register. And he said it wouldn't be worth it for the thousands of dollars that a new system would cost.
I certainly understand that.
Yeah.
Kind of doubtful that would be necessary. If they're buying pre-stamped cigarettes, they would just be inputting the price.
That's,
So,
and I can tell him that now that you talked about that this morning, but that was just 2 of them that voiced their concerns on that. And that I don't know if y'all were y'all given the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
My numbers that I came up with yesterday were not anywhere close to what that spreadsheet from the Weldon Cooper Center was. So I just wanted to know. Yes.
Yes, if I might. So Kevin had run from the PDC, Kevin Bird had run some initial numbers and put together a spreadsheet of what his estimate would be in terms of revenues at 40 cents for every one of these conversations. It was based on experience in Charlottesville. And then a couple of jurisdictions were able to kind of give their some of the folks that are already charging, the towns that are in cities that are already charging, were able to put theirs in. And it turned out what Kevin had in that spreadsheet turned out to be very significantly higher.
$83,649.
Yes.
A year?
Now that's so if that original estimate was about $149,000. And so then for Floyd County, absent the town. But again, as I was telling you earlier, he was kind enough to contact everybody, and so has the best data of anybody in the region about what we think it would actually generate.
If they told me they sold 50 to 60 packs a week, then I counted it as 60 to use my spreadsheet. I did the highs. And the monthly average, there's 13,192 packs of cigarettes sold in Floyd with the highs. Like down here at the Family Dollar, it said Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they may sell 20 packs. If there's a game at the rec center or the little restaurant up the street is doing something, they may sell 100 packs. So it's hard for them to kind of give you, it just depends on what's going on with them. But with the 1,300, it would give us $5,276.80 a month. That's $63,321.60 for the year without buying the stamps, without, I did the Google map to go from the courthouse to every one of the stores. It's 84.20 miles. So that's 2 hours driving time without counting the cigarettes that I would have to go in and count. And so when it's audit week or tax deadline week, I can't have one person out of the office just counting cigarettes. So
What are they counting cigarettes for?
it would be my responsibility to go make sure they all have stamps that are in the way what I read.
Stamp.
Yeah, I have to go around and make sure that they're.
Once a week.
I don't know. I don't know how often it is.
Radford, I know when I spoke with Radford, they randomly check.
Just
Right.
randomly, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of due diligence, whatever you think is appropriate
Needed.
to make sure that you're not
Yeah.
having an enforcement problem. I don't think there's any
It was
mandated audit requirement.
You don't want the first box, you want the one behind.
Yeah, and if I might add to that a little bit too. So my understanding is in many ways, the administrative piece is very similar. And I think Lisa's talked to some folks about this. The administrative part, not the enforcement part, which is what this is referring to, is very similar to the meals and transient occupancy. There's a report, this is how much we think sent to the wholesaler, so this is how many we think you have. Send it back and tell us, is this right? How many of these have you sold? And then that gets trued up. So that's kind of that piece. In terms of the enforcement, of course, what Kevin had included at a regional level was that that person would also be in charge of enforcement. And now I'll ask Steve to correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding, though, if the county did it, it would be possible for us to ask our law enforcement folks to do enforcement. Of course, then there would be time and whatever, but that's another possibility. And then some folks just said, they just kind of randomly, somebody from the staff goes out or that kind of thing. So if you could clarify.
What I'm envisioning there is that although the constitutional officers might be doing some compliance and enforcement, if there's a violation, their enforcement would be limited to then reporting to the county attorney or the Commonwealth attorney or the sheriff
Right.
for law enforcement action.
Right.
I have seen under the regional approach, they're actually vesting the enforcement agents of the regional body with arrest powers, with the ability to carry weapons. And that's one option that's being considered under the regional approach, but that is not what you would have to do. I think the default would be, the default would be that you would, if you become aware of a violation during your typical audit spot checking process, you refer that to law enforcement as appropriate. But there's civil actions to be taken, and of course, county attorney.
Let me treasure goes and grab someone that has a stamp.
One thing I do want to go back to the cigarette definition. That definition is in 58.1-1000, which is the state cigarette tax, not the local. I think we are well justified in using that definition, but the local definitions that I've seen actually exclude roll your own. So that's where I was getting at. The local definitions there's not included in that. I think you can, but you're not compelled to roll your own.
Alright,
You don't see any rodeo anymore. You don't see very few pipe smokers.
yeah, you really don't.
And you see more chewers than you do smokers. You know, that's the ones that yeah.
Were you surprised at the numbers that you both found?
I was surprised at the one from the Weldon Cooper Center, but I actually worked at Express when I was in high school, and most of them commented that their numbers were going down. There's other things out there, I don't know, but the vaping.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of things that are replacing the cigarettes now that they don't sell like they used to.
So you estimate $63,200 a year, roughly. I mean,
Before cost, before buying the stamp, before.
Right.
That's not the cost of the stamps.
Yeah, right.
You tell me what you can pay 5,000 for whatever you did pay them.
That's what I wonder.
I assume that will go down over
Well,
time. but
yeah.
too,
To be fair, those numbers I gave you for the regional would be then divided out by the
Understood.
stamps, right? So it wasn't 100 and whatever to us, or 35,000 for the stamps to us, our portion of that.
Right.
You got 6 people, it's gonna cost us 130,000 divided 6 ways, you know.
Still,
It's still a pretty good chunk of money we have to come up with.
yeah, that's why it was important to drill this all down, to see if it's worth doing.
Well, and this is just me and the ladies that I work with. One of the county treasurers actually goes and she gets the cigarettes out of the retailer, and then she holds the scale and sells the one, and if they want to buy it back, then they come buy it back at the sale. But, so, if you can get the deputy to do that, I don't really feel comfortable asking the ladies that work with me to go out and.
seizing the cigarettes.
Yeah, and that had me worried, but now that you're saying maybe the deputy and, or one could ride with us, or.
See, that'd be another thing for my code enforcement officer that I want.
I do wonder if imposing, so this is just thinking out loud, I do wonder if imposing a tax, we create a situation where, unbeknownst to retailers, there are individuals who have cigarettes that fall off the back of the trucks it's just a colloquial type of term that I grew up with. And then all of a sudden, they're selling them to retailers who don't know, and then they are in violation of a tax, and I just don't know. I hate to think that
You'll also have to think about Salters buys a roll of 1,300 and half of their cigarettes expire before they're sold. Do I refund their money back to them? Do they, once that stamp is on that pack, it's not going to be, you can't reuse it.
No.
So we'll have to decide on that. And
Do they have to throw away a lot of cigarettes?
I don't know. I know that the guy, when I worked down there, he would come back and the ones that had expired, we would check them off and he would take them back with them so that we got our credit for them. But
Right, so you
I don't
get
know how that
credit.
stamp would go.
You can provide in your ordinance for a method to basically sell back the unused or damaged stamps. In this case, if they're just disposing of the cigarette, expired, I think that we could account for that. I don't know if they'd have to destroy the pack and turn the damaged stamp back in, but.
I think one county I spoke to, they actually just certified that those were sent back or something, yeah.
And the one that I spoke to, they actually done like an exoneration. They refunded the money of the stamps that wasn't used, what was originally paid. They refunded back.
I saw one where they only refunded 90%, but they kept 10% for cost of doing it.
Yeah, as long as you have some reasonable evidence that the cigarettes aren't now being sold untaxed, I think you can provide for a refund.
Yeah, if I might, the last thing I wanted to make sure, we were not asking you obviously for a decision about this today, but obviously there was a lot more information that you didn't have before, we want to make sure you had. Steve, the last thing is the timing of all this, which is why this is coming out. Don't we have to make some kind of decision by the summer about their, yeah. Sorry, I didn't tell Steve I was going to ask him this question.
What, I also had a question, the ones that are already in the stores, will it just be from that point forward, or do they have to buy stamps and put on the ones that are already in the store too, at that starting point?
I think that it would be, there would be an effective date of, let's say hypothetically it's August 1st. Anything sold in the county after that date would have to be taxed.
So they would have to
So,
put stamps on
yeah.
the ones already in the store.
And you want to give them some lead time so they can
Prepare.
have inventory control of them.
Little humor. Just in the meantime, while he's checking with that point real quick, I would just be curious to know that, to make sure that this would not exclude any providers that service Floyd. So where retailers, are they going to have to look for another wholesaler, or would they be able to use the same ones? Are they still set up for it? If they have to go somewhere else, then are they going to have new regulations on them? Like, okay, well, it's our policy, you have to buy so many, yada, yada, yada. What kind of impact is that going to make on our retailers? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, and maybe that's something that we can circle back with some of the smaller jurisdictions, the smaller towns that are already doing this, maybe some of those over in Giles or Pulaski, and see what their experience has been. And that's all I can think of. I don't know if you all have other thoughts.
And also, if we do it and Montgomery County doesn't, or, the people that we're kind of a bedroom county, if they are shopping at Walmart to buy their cigarettes, they might buy their bread, they might buy their milk, and we might lose revenue from other things because of them buying them outside of the county.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but sometimes I do. What is your gut feelings on this as our two financial people in our county? How do you feel about this? What is from a county point of view, not personally, but as as our commissioner of the revenue and our treasurer? If you don't feel comfortable answering, that's fine too. I really don't want to put you on the spot. I just would like your input, other than just numbers.
It's going to be a lot of work, yeah. With our staff that we have now, we're very blessed with who we have. That it's going to be more on our ladies.
And like I voiced my opinion about the going out and counting and stuff. The two ladies that are working for me, I love them, but they don't want to do it. So I would be the one that would be doing it. I wouldn't ask them to go out and do that if they don't feel comfortable. And that I would not do that. I would be the one to go out and that will be hard because there are things that I have to do at the office that they don't do. And
So would your position then change if it was a regional? Would hurt?
if somebody else was doing the enforcing, then I'm not afraid of working. I don't mind putting the time into, I don't mind putting the time in to get the computers set up and we would have to have the space for the stamps. They're not probably on rolls, but we would need the safe, and I'm not afraid of that, but it's the enforcing part that I don't want to do.
I think that was both of our concern from the beginning, was the enforcing part of it.
And if you had your regional approach, you wouldn't be responsible for the tax stamps, it would be the regional office.
You would you'd just be tallying the monies.
I'm okay with that.
You'd be reviewing the reports from the regional body to make sure they were giving the proper accounting.
Make sure that we got what we're supposed to be getting and that kind of stuff.
I mean, both of us want to make sure we're doing right for the county.
Right, of
It
course,
saves the county in the long run.
of course.
And
I know that.
pull up the statute, I didn't see a sort of a time limitation there, so let me look at that and get back to you, because I'm just not seeing it on
I
that.
sort of remember hearing something too, that there was like, you had to make a decision by or something. I kind of remember that as well.
I was thinking that I would definitely defer to Steve's research, that we had to, if we were gonna do something regionally, the regional board had to be set up and all that by particular time.
That might have been just what came out of the New River Valley Regional Commission.
Yeah, that I don't
So
know.
that might have just been
But I don't know.
self-imposed, like everybody's gotta make a decision by.
There's been a number of versions discussed in the General Assembly when it was clear that it was moving in this direction. There were a number of versions in the General Assembly that were amended as time went on. I think
Okay.
from input from VML and VACO and others. I know that an earlier iteration actually said that counties cannot pass a cigarette tax unless they join a regional board, and that regional board I think had to have 10 members at the time. So that was amended out,
Gotcha.
and it's optional now. So the time limitation may be something that also was amended out. I'll double check
Gotcha,
it. I like that.
gotcha.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. I just figured, I knew it was something that y'all were discussing, but we wanted to make sure now that we've kind of moved past a couple other issues that we've had all this information and then can think about what you'd like to do. And of course, it's unfortunate Mr. Booth couldn't be here because he often has a lot of input on this, but we'll follow up with him.
So real quick, question surrounding this, but unrelated, I guess, at the same time, if it could be. I know we had talked previously about this, and I don't think we revisited it, but is this a similar situation associated with the marijuana tax that could be coming down the pike?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Because, I mean, if so, that would be curious to know that now.
Yeah.
Do we know that? Anybody know?
I don't. I don't have
There's
any
also time,
It's a brave new world, Justin.
Yeah.
also
That's
understand,
still wide open. I
That's
guess I should
why.
say.
but isn't there some deadlines associated with that, as far as when counties may incorporate such things with that as well?
I have not researched that.
Okay. Could you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I agree, it's,
Because I mean,
I know,
trying to make this decision and then,
have to make it again.
yeah, a couple months later, well, hey, we could have done all this one time. I mean,
Yep.
that's information I need to know.
I think it's several more years until marijuana actually can be sold.
24, right?
Right.
I was thinking, was it 24 or 22? I can't remember. There's so many different numbers floating
I
around.
know, I think it's like you get the ability to grow in 22 and then they can't sell until 24 was the last thing I read.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're staying on top of it.
You can start to-
Well, yes. Yes, that you won't get,
Decriminalized.
it'll be decriminalized, right? Thank you for that correct terminology, said counsel.
It's just, oh, yeah.
They're brilliantly somehow managing to let the black market exist for 3 years.
Yeah, I know.
Not legalized, which is probably the dumbest way they could have done it. But
Yeah,
I just want to make sure we're being respectful across the board.
yeah, exactly.
And
And efficient in our efforts.
Absolutely.
Respectful and efficient in our efforts.
Probably best way to put that.
All right, just wanted to double check, you're good.
I didn't pass out.
See, those public speaking courses and assignments were important.
Yes, they
Sort of
were.
worried about you there for a second.
I didn't like them in high school either.
Chair, well, you do have, let's see, things remaining on the agenda is the second closed session regarding manufacturing and support services, and we originally had that scheduled at 12 o'clock. And then the adoption of several resolutions, potential adoption of several resolutions, and then a discussion of the tourism program draft agreement. And I think those are the three things that remain on your agenda at 5 minutes to 12.
Nothing easy.
Do we need council for B through B and C?
I don't think so.
Well, we do need closed session, yeah.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank y'all.
Is it?
Probably. We probably need to do the closed session first
Okay.
and then come back for the C.
All right, if you want to read your closed session.
All right.
Before, did you get final estimation on personnel question? We couldn't do it?
Oh,
That's what Steve said? Okay.
Sorry, it took a minute. Okay, so, but the closed session regarding manufacturing and support services, 2.2-3711A3, discussion of the acquisition or disposal of real property. 2.2-3711A5, discussion of a prospective business or expansion of an existing business. And 2.2-3711A29, discussion of the award of a public contract.
Yeah, I'll take a motion, to go in,
So moved?
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. So, Ms. Kuchenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.